It's the Ed Bernstein Show, Home Edition. Now, here's your host, Ed Bernstein.
Hey, welcome to our show. It's my pleasure to have Congresswoman Dina Titus. Congresswoman, how are you?
Well, I'm good. It's cold back here in Washington, but it's nice to see you, Ed. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, let's start with that question. You've had a lot of snow in Washington. It's been cold. It's been very interesting over the last month since 2022 started. You have the advantage of having been in Washington a little bit than our other representatives. You've seen a lot of changes, I'm sure. When you look back, what is the most significant change to you?
Well, I tend to compare it to when I was in the state legislature, and so it's very different from that. But one thing that's happened over the time I've been here is it's become increasingly partisan and increasingly less civil. You know, we've got some members from the other party who want to carry guns on the floor of the House. And I think all of that's kind of a reflection of the previous administration, and it kind of culminated in the January 6th invasion of the Capitol.
When they say they want to carry guns, what is it that they're afraid of?
I can't imagine. It's not me, but at the same time they want to carry a gun, they don't want to wear a mask. So it's the same people who think that they're safe without a mask, but I guess they're not safe without a gun.
You know, it seems to me, I just got back from a trip myself. I was in D.C. Last week, actually a hockey game when the Knights were playing the Capitals last, and I noticed that there's much more attention to wearing masks in D.C. than there is here in Las Vegas and in many other places. After that trip, I ended up in Florida, and it just seems like nobody's even wearing. And I was just curious. It seems like, you know, we've reached a point where the people who are going to wear masks are going to wear them. The people who are not are not. The people who are vaccinated are going to be vaccinated. The people who are not going to be. And so we just resign ourselves to those facts.
Well, I'm a little more optimistic than that, but it's one of the issues that should be based on science that has become so politicized. One place you see it a lot is in school board meetings. That's turned into like, you're making my child try to stay safe. It just doesn't make any sense. In Washington, which was a hotbed for the Omicron for a while, I think it's getting a little better now. You have to show your vaccination card to even go in a restaurant. So it's pretty strict back here. But you're right, in Las Vegas, there are just going to be some people who are there. I'm here on holiday. I'm not going to do what you tell me, and devil take the hindmost.
Yeah. And let's just talk a little bit about what's going on in Las Vegas. I know you've great advocate for trying to get our federal funds into us back here at home. What are some of the examples that we can really identify of how, you know, some of the federal bills and the Biden program has really impacted us here in Las Vegas?
Well, there have been several different recovery acts, and all of them have affected parts of the state. The state's never had this much money, and the school districts never had this money. But the thing to remember is that when the economy is hit hard, Las Vegas is hit harder because people need a little money in their pocket to go on holiday, and they want to feel safe. So we had the highest unemployment in the country because so many people work those frontline jobs that were dependent on hospitality. And when they shut down the strip and nobody was coming, you can imagine how devastating that was. But because of some of the funding, both for unemployment, for shuttered venues, some of the entertainment, restaurant subsidies, we have come back. In fact, there's been one report that says Las Vegas is the fastest recovering. We've gotten back about 95% of the jobs that were lost.
Yeah, and to that comment, at the same time, it seems like we can't hire busboys, insurers, and other workers. I mean, it's just every restaurant you see, help wanted. Is that a good thing? I mean, it's good that I guess the jobs are available. Not a good thing if we can't fill them.
You're so right about that, Ed. And I hear that from every industry, whether it's a computer outfit or a restaurant or construction, they can't find people to work. And, I guess there are a number of reasons for that. Some of the people who work from home like that arrangement and don't want to give it up. Some of the people don't want to go back to a job that won't pay for the rent or anything. So that's an argument for raising the minimum wage. Women can't go back now because the school situation is so uncertain. Maybe they're in, maybe they're not, and we don't provide any kind of child care assistance. So I think it's a whole range of reasons that people either aren't going back to work or aren't finding the kind of jobs that they want or need.
Same time, I mean, I don't know if these are related or not, but let me ask the question about the immigration.
Mhm.
A lot of these jobs are filled by new residents, immigrants coming from other, because particularly when you're looking at the restaurant and the fast food industry. And at the same time, it seems like we're blocking those people from coming in, and there's a gap in who's going to fill those jobs.
Well, that's so true. We haven't been able to get immigration reform through the Congress. The House has passed it 3 or 4 times in different versions, and it just gets stuck in the Senate. And yet we rely on these people for the frontline jobs. These are the people who are picking our food or stocking grocery shelves or waiting on tables or like fast food. And so they provide those frontline jobs, and yet we're not taking advantage of what their contributions can be, either to the tax base or to the employment levels or just to our culture and society, when we definitely need to do that. And I think it's going to impact the Hispanic turnout in the next election because they're very frustrated. We've been promising, and yet because of the Senate numbers, we just can't get it passed.
Is there anything we do as a state or as, a municipality or county that can help this situation?
Well, they've got what they call sanctuary cities where the police departments don't enforce the border, the ICE folks. But Las Vegas is not a sanctuary city. There are some arrangements, but it's not that. So this is mostly a federal issue. You see some people along the border becoming vigilantes to try to round up people who are trying to get here. You see the emphasis on building a wall. You hear a lot of that rhetoric from the Republican side of the aisle, but it's pretty much a federal issue.
Are things any better at the border than they were 4 years ago?
Well, it comes and goes. COVID has affected it. The crime in Central America has affected it. Political instability has affected it. So right now, the policy is to try to keep families together, not to encourage people to come, but try to keep families together, not separate them like you saw in the last administration.
Yeah, there was a story in the paper. I was referring back to your other comment about how much money we've gotten here in Nevada. There was a story I read in the paper the other day about, state is pretty well off right now and financially. I guess a lot of that is from the money we receive from the federal government.
Well, that's right. And even if our economy has come back, the federal money kept us sustained before that could turn around. Gambling money is up. We still don't have filled as many rooms as we did before the pandemic. The main thing that we're missing is conventions, but they're starting to come back by that convention business trade and international travel. That's why I've been so concerned about getting international standards and visas and things in place, not blacklisting anybody, because international travelers stay longer and they spend more. And Las Vegas is part of a loop. You can come and go to San Francisco, Disneyland, Las Vegas, and Grand Canyon. And what a trip that is.
It's a terrific trip. And I also flying around the last week, the flying I've done personally, is that the planes seemed very crowded.
Yes.
Airports are, at least in Vegas, did not seem to be very crowded to me. And I think it must be less flights that are causing this, right? I mean, the airlines cut back on a lot of their flights during COVID. So is that strictly an airline decision? And starting the routes back up into Vegas, or is there any influence that you can have in that regard?
Well, we did put a lot of subsidies into the airlines. That was one of the things that came out of my committee of transportation. When I was first flying back here, there'd be 3 or 4 people on a whole big jet airlines. So you're right, they started cutting the flights. Now you add to that the lack of personnel because they've got COVID. Now you got fewer flights. And also we've had a lot of bad weather. And so that's cut back on flights. And a lot of people have gotten stranded. So that makes them kind of have a bad taste when it comes to travel. But it has definitely picked up. Now every flight that I take from Las Vegas to Washington and back is full.
Oh yeah, yeah, I experienced that myself. So I assume you work closely with Pete Buttigieg, Transportation Secretary, on these kind of issues.
That's right, exactly. And he's been out, and his undersecretary has been out, and is planning another trip. But Las Vegas needs this investment in infrastructure, because I say we don't make anything but dreams come true. We have to import everything, whether it's lobsters or flowers or people. So we need that infrastructure. So if we can build I-11 to Phoenix, only 2 cities that don't have an interstate highway, maybe a speed train to California, and just repair some of the roads and streets in the city of Las Vegas so people and visitors can get around better.
Yeah, I mean, look, traveling from Southern California to Las Vegas, and very, very difficult the last few years. But I did see where we did get some federal money to improve the part of the I-15 from Nevada side. Is that correct? Or
that's right, down near the border where it goes from 3 or 4 lanes to 2. What they want to do is widen the shoulder on each side so you can have another lane of traffic. Now that's controversial because most of the traffic experts say if you build it, they'll come. The more roads you build, the more cars you'll have. That's what the argument for getting that speed train.
And look, I've lived in Las Vegas for 47 years. We were talking about the speed train 47 years ago. They were talking about it. Are we really any closer?
Well, I think we are. I was on that super speed train commission with Californians, first appointed by Bob Miller, then Kenny Gwynn, then Jim Gibbons, who I think forgot I was on there or he would have thrown me off. So I'm with you. I've been working on it. But now we've got more of a company private buy-in. There's support from government. There's more money for railroads, and it's clean. That's the big thing now, is with the environmental concerns. We want clean energy, and that train will use so much less energy than trucks will cause in terms of air pollution and wear and tear.
And at the same time, we're having this conversation. You look around town and new houses, new going up everywhere, cranes and construction going on in Vegas, people continuing to, we're still booming here.
Well, that's right. We're one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the country. So we're fast growing. We're also one of the hottest areas in the country. And we also suffer most from lack of water. Just go out to Lake Mead and you can see the bathtub ring. So any decisions about expanded growth, I think have to take that into account. You got to put sustainability at the top of the list, because when you run out of water, that's it.
I mean, these are all challenges when you talk about the partisanness of Congress, and you have all these issues that we should be focusing on instead of some of the other stuff we're focusing on. It would seem like, hey, it's no blame. Why is anybody opposed to more water into areas that need it? Why is anybody opposed to infrastructure?
Right.
Being we have bridges that are collapsing in some states.
Yeah, Pennsylvania just last week.
Yeah. And we have roads in Las Vegas that you start driving down the road and all the cars beep 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 beep, as you drive down the road. But
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to ask. So that infrastructure bill, it hasn't been passed by the Senate. And they're going to take it apart piece by piece, I guess, and try to pass certain parts of it. What parts do you think that you can get passed?
Well, the first physical infrastructure bill passed. This is like the supplemental human infrastructure. You know, there's some funding in there for internet in underserved areas. People think that means rural Nevada, but it's really the inner city. You know, the children in the inner city don't have access to internet, or their schools are old and decrepit and they don't have the smart wiring. So that would be something that we could do that would be a real contribution. A lot of climate stuff is in that bill. Doing more with electric cars and electric charging stations, I think would be very helpful. Put them along that I-15 or I-11 to Phoenix. That would be a good idea. To make streets safe for all users, because now we're trying to get people out of their cars. They use mass transit, bicycles, maybe they're walking, but you know how bad the streets are in Las Vegas for safety. We've seen several just horrendous accidents recently. But one thing you said, Ed, was so true. That's not supposed to be partisan. That's not, I mean, infrastructure is not ideological. It's not like you're arguing socialism versus communism. You're arguing where to put the bridge. And it's interesting because the Republicans all voted against the bills, but they run home to their districts and show the check. Oh, look what we got for you. They don't bother to say, but you know, I voted against it.
Yeah, it's, I'm sure it's a frustrating place to be. I'm looking at the photograph behind you. It looks like it's all the original members of the Rat Pack, which were responsible for building Las Vegas to some extent. You
That's
know,
right.
I always tell people that when they ask, what is the #1 reason that Las Vegas has been successful? And I always believed it was air conditioning. The invention of air conditioning made Las Vegas what it is
Well,
today.
I'm sure that is true. That made a big difference. You know, we have a Elvis cutout outside our door, so anybody walking down the hall will know this is Las Vegas office.
And what's the process for getting in and out of House of Representatives to visit?
Well, right now it's still closed to outside visitors unless you have a member come down and get you in. So you don't see lobbyists, you don't see Boy Scout troops, you don't see a lot of visitors from out of town coming. It's still closed. And also we're still allowing vote by proxy because too many people get in there at one time, and COVID has gone through. I think about 50 members have had it here recently.
Yeah, at least once. Right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's also around the Senate called the Billionaire's tax, which I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it affects maybe 700 people.
Are you talking about the Elizabeth Warren rich wealthy tax?
Yeah. So it doesn't really affect anybody who's not a billionaire, and it really ensures people who are billionaires are some fair share of in their taxes, right? So is that just in the Senate, or has that been an issue in the House? Or
No, well, that's usually associated with Elizabeth Warren, but there'd be some support for it in the House. You know, one of the big issues, and even President Biden has said this, is that income gap. You got a few people at the top, and we're getting more like a third world country, a big gap, and then a lot of people at the bottom. So you're right. You're talking about 1% of 1% who would be affected, who hadn't been paying their fair share.
yeah, and because what you're saying is, I mean, you talk about minimum wage. Even at a minimum wage of $15 an hour, you still cannot really afford to have a mortgage and have a family living on $15 an hour. So, and that bill is, where is that bill? The minimum bill?
Well, I don't think it's going anywhere because we can't get anything out of the Senate. And now we've got Ben Ray Lujan from New Mexico who just had a stroke, and he's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. So that makes it absolutely tied. Before it was tied, but we had the vice president who could split it. Now it's absolutely tied. So I don't think you're going to see anything coming out of the Senate for the next month and a half.
So when you look at this campaign cycle, I mean, there seems to be issues that are important you are running for. What do you sense are the issues this time, other than January 6th?
Well, you certainly hear the former president beating that drum again. Inflation will be an issue, hopefully, and all the economists say that this investment we're making will help to bring inflation down. If it comes down, I think that will be a good thing. But there's some issues like critical race theory that people are hammering. You saw that in the Virginia race. Some people are just still mad about COVID, not that the disease is there, but that they have to wear a mask or have to show their vaccination card, or they're just sick of it. And so whoever's in office will take the blame for that. That's why it's up to the Democrats to really tell people what we've done, not what we haven't done.
But based on what you said earlier about the his votes and some of the minority votes, you seem to be concerned that they may not come out to vote, particularly in light of some of the voting restrictions that are going on in other states.
Well, that's exactly right. It's an off-year election, so that turnout is always lower than an off year. And we have tried to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which restores some of the provisions of 1965. Also, the For the People Act, which deals with campaign finance. We passed them out of the House 2 or 3 times, and they're just sitting over there in the Senate. Meantime, 49 states have passed 400, have introduced and passed a number of laws that restrict voting. Nevada went the opposite direction. We expanded it, but they've already got initiative petitions going around to get signatures on the ballot that say you have to have an ID in order to vote. And they want to do this kind of ranked choice voting, which of course works to their advantage. But there's all kind of versions, doing away with early voting, doing away with mail-in voting, you name it. If they can restrict voting, that's what they want to do.
Yeah, and it seems to me a big waste of time to focus on these things instead of building bridges. It's what we really need to do here. There's been some change in the congressional boundaries of districts. Your district has been enlarged, right? It's been enlarged. Yeah. So where's your district now?
Well, it was the heart of the valley, and it was pretty much a rectangle. It was very cohesive, included Las Vegas and the entertainment corridor, included the Hispanic barrio on the east side and the Asian community on the west side. It was the most diverse district in the country. They split it right in half, took half of the Democrats and split those again between Susie and Stephen. So, and gave me Anthem and Boulder City. So now, instead of being a cohesive district, you've got some people who want to send everybody back and build a wall, and other people who are saying we need some immigration reform. So it's going to be a real different place to represent. And the result of it is they were trying to make Susie and Stephen safer, but there weren't enough Democrats to do that. So now all 3 seats are in jeopardy.
What do you see as new residents are coming in, they're registering, or is it more of a Democrat, Republican edge? And I know independents keep growing and growing.
You're right about that. That's the thing that also is going to make this election difficult. We not only have the first time we can use mail-in ballots. Who's that going to benefit? How's that going to work? And second, at the DMV, when you come in here new and you register, if you don't say Democrat or Republican, you get automatically thrown into the nonpartisan. So nonpartisans now are equal to Democrats and Republicans in terms of numbers. And we don't really know who they are, why they're nonpartisan. Do they lean one way or the other? It's difficult to gauge who these new voters are.
Right. So does that make it difficult for our political process? Because then it makes the pool of Democrats and the pool of Republicans smaller, which makes it more prone to have people more in control of the primaries on both sides.
That's right. It makes it, what it leads to are more extremists have a more ability to pull those people in the primary, and that becomes the race. So that is not very democratic. Also, when you split the Hispanic vote 3 ways so that they can never have a majority, that's not really constitutional either.
Right. Is Hispanic population still growing like it was in Southern Nevada, or is it now the Asian population nations seem to be winning that percentage.
Well, the Asian Pacific Island population is the fastest growing, but you still have a large Hispanic population, and they're coming of age because they've been here longer. Now those children will be 18 if they're citizens. If not, they're dreamers, and that's one of the things we've been trying to get past, is to give them some rights because they were brought here as little babies by their parents through no choice of their own. They're just as much as American as you and I are.
Is that something that the president can do with an executive order?
Well, not and have it stand, and it'll immediately be challenged in the courts if he does. And Obama tried doing that, and I think there's, some push for it, but you really need it in legislation because you don't know what this court's going to do. Look how conservative the Supreme Court is now.
Yeah, that's for sure. So do you have any predictions on whether Donald Trump will be running in a couple of years?
He seems to be out there making a lot of noise, but he's got some competition. The guy from Florida and maybe this guy from Virginia, they seem to be pretty active, but I wish we'd be done with him, frankly.
Well, I wish that we'd, what's the old saying? I wish we'd get along, right?
Yeah, that's what a lot of my constituents say. Can't you just get something done? Can't you just get along? And it's gotten pretty brutal.
Yeah, I know. We just need we just need others to get on board here.
That's right.
But thank you so much, Congresswoman Dina Titus, and I look forward to seeing you back in Las Vegas. I know you're back and forth here every week, so traveling, and hope you're to a uncrowded plane on your next trip.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.